welcome to Queer Armor, and today I'm out with my main man Marquis out in the woods shooting an alt history trench gun. What the hell is an alt history trench gun? Well, let's talk about it. During World War I, the Germans both used piles of mustard gas on American soldiers and tried to claim that the Winchester shotgun was a war crime. Think about that for a second. This is literally a military gassing opposing enemy forces, but claiming a pump-action shotgun is against the rules of war and is considered inhumane. How the hell did we end up there? The Winchester model of 1898 has a very unique feature called slam fire. If you hold the trigger down, the trigger is pushed out into the bar, at which point, while you are racking back and forth violently with your shotgun in order to pump rounds into it, as soon as you load the next round in, it will go off. It's just going to load in and immediately pop.
Let's see some slam fire goodness. Damn. Those are some dead Germans.
World War I was an ancient war with modern technology. At least that's what the generals were gearing up for, and it ended up being a massive bloodbath because of that. We had this expectation that, or at least a lot of the generals did, that a lot of the military tactics of the past 100 and 150 some odd years would still be relevant. The idea of a fighter plane, the first fighter planes of World War I involved a pilot taking a handgun and shooting at another pilot. We were at the very beginnings of technology. Shotguns weren't actually weapons of war at the time. They were largely considered hunting weapons. But when the Americans entered World War I, our troops were not battle-weary. We had not spent the past 8 years fighting a giant slaughter where we threw millions of our own to die in trenches. We were up and at 'em and ready to conquer. Combined with, we had been studying what trenches were really going to be like and took the technology of what we had that would apply to that to deadly ends. The trench gun was a simple farmer's tool back home. It was the type of shotgun you would use for clearing hogs. Applied with the right ammunition in World War II, and because of the speed with which you could get buckshot into a relatively narrow corridor, you could literally sweep the trenches with them. There are at least a handful of reports that refer to the Winchester as a shotgun trench broom. At the end of your 6+1 rounds, there was a bayonet. In the event that you were able to fire off all 7 rounds and still had some member of the opposing force coming after you, you had a sword at the end of your shotgun. This was genuinely viable in World War I. Bayonet charges were viable all the way up to the early World War II, middle of World War II even. Bayonet charges were still considered viable as a last means of defense if you ran out of ammunition. The next wars are going to be different. Every war is an evolution of the one behind it and becomes its own brand new monster. So the wars of the future aren't going to require the same weaponry. As a bit of an intellectual exercise, I started asking myself, what would a alt history 2027 trench gun look like? And what would a trench gun operator's setup look like? Before we get into the gun, I'll just quickly go over. So this is the kit for the 2027 alt history trench gunner. Before I get into the 2027 alt history trench gun, I thought I'd go over the componentry I picked, some of it out of stuff that I happen to have lying around, but all of it picked because it makes sense for a resistance fighter that has hobbled together their kit, that is emblematic of somebody who could be pressed into developing their own trench gun. A lot of the trench guns that were used in the war weren't actual trench guns. They started out as normal 1897 Winchesters that people just brought from home, and the War Department gave them the parts to convert them over or to mount a bayonet to. The idea of this alternative history trench gun is that, one, It's the same 6+1. 2, it uses a brown that models the Winchester's paint job. 3, it integrates the heat shield, so you don't have to worry about heat messing with your laser optic. And then instead of setting up a bayonet the same way that they had been for actual combat use, frankly, I don't think in modern combat you're really going to be using a bayonet. At least not for traditional ramming a sword into somebody combat, but repositioning and ambushes are always going to be part of military tactics. They have been since we were throwing rocks at each other, and they will be when we're throwing lasers at each other. The ability to break a window and create a rotation hole or set up an ambush is something that makes sense in modern combat. So for an alt-history trench gun, this makes sense as the bayonet length. Going through some of the rest of the kit, we have a 9mm Taurus, the Channel's Queer Armorer's Taurus Special Edition. That is in a rather shitty drop leg holster that I'm going to go over in the holster review video. But in exchange for being rather crappy, it is modular and allows for you to adapt it to a variety of handguns, so it works for this. In terms of emergency supplies, I have a backpack that has most of the medical kit, but the emergency supply that is most important is your tourniquet. So that got loaded onto the strap. I am not running a traditional plate carrier. This is a armor setup that I would not recommend, but again, the idea behind this is it's supposed to be somebody who's been pressed into war. So the idea of makeshift armor and what can you find lying around has a lot of weight. This isn't full body armor in the same way that a plate carrier can carry something that's rifle rated. This is a 3A soft vest that is technically past its expiration date, but is at least functional. And then on top of that is a fireproof shirt. It doesn't seem like it would be the most important thing, right up until you have an emergency, at which point you will be incredibly thankful that your shirt cannot pass the fire through to you. The whole point of this build is war doesn't come in a clean, easy to determine path. You're never going to find out about the battles that you're going to have to deal with cleanly, perfectly beforehand, with everything laid out. You won't get to pick. You're going to have to press something kind of old and weird into service and make it work. Don't just train assuming you will have Gucci gear. Train with the stuff you have. Set up things in such a way that they make sense just using the things that you have, and figure out how to adjust without acquiring new equipment, without adjusting for a thing you want, just with what you have on hand. How do you make that usable? How do you make that practical? How do you defend a home or your country with it? So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you hated it, take your shotgun and point it over the mouse, line the mouse up on the subscribe button, and then unload onto your mouse. Trust me, you'll feel so much better afterwards. That's it for me. Stay dangerous, keep each other safe, and remember, moral doesn't mean legal, and Stonewall was a riot. Peace.
All right, let's see.
Going live!
3, 2, 1. Yeah. 1897 Winchester Slamfire.
Holy
It is a very fun feature.
Holy, that's awesome.